My name is Carl Quo, and this is Founder Quest, a podcast about the journeys of starting a game studio. Today we're talking with Ichiro Lambe, founder of Totally Human Media. This is a bit of a different journey for Ichiro, who previously founded Dejobaan Games and Worlds Apart, which would eventually become SOE Denver. The journey is different in that, rather than focusing on building games, he's focused on the problem of game discovery and building a platform to help players find their next favorite game. I've been digging into game discovery as a problem recently. It's something that the industry is talking a lot about. And what started out as sitting down with Ichiro to learn more about his thinking around the problem led quickly to bringing him on the pod to talk about his founding journey and what's unique and what's not about it. I really enjoyed talking with Ichiro, and I think you will too. Let's jump in. The way I love to always start is, for me, there was a moment where I said, okay, I'm going to start a company and I'm emotionally and mentally committed to it, right? Like before it was like, well, maybe I do it, right? Like I've always thought about doing it. But then there was suddenly a moment where I'm like, nope, I'm locked in. It's happening. What was that moment for you and sort of what led up to it?
Oh boy, Carl. So this is Totally Human Media, and we love every game. That's my third company at this point. So we have to go way back to not just the last decade, not just the last century, but the last millennium. As you know, a friend and I got together and we made a bulletin board system doors game back when BBSs were a thing, and we made enough money to buy our next computers. And this is just text-based, 2,400 baud at most. And we're like, my goodness, this is amazing. We can do this. And we love it. And we make money. And, partway through college or towards the end of college, actually, I said to myself, this was after I had been I worked, part-time job in games. I said, look, I love doing this. I can probably do it. It's probably not going to be easy, but it's better than going out and getting a real job. So why don't I do that? That's 1999. And no, I lie, Carl. I lie. I did that before that. 1995 was my first company. We, a group of us get together, and we were like, we want to do something big together, and we founded a company that would later become Sony Online Denver. And 1999 is the company that I founded solo and ran for 25 years. And in both cases, I wanted to do something slightly different. Year plus ago, I wanted to do games discovery platforms, and like in every case, just a vision of something really interesting and cool and different that nobody else was doing at the time.
So when you're thinking about that stuff, do you find that it starts with that idea, right? Like, oh, actually, I see something, no one else is doing it. I'm really motivated to go and solve it. And so I guess I'm starting a company because that seems to be the only way to do it, right? Like there's no company I can join to solve that. Or is it, oh, I want to go and do something. Let me look around for the problem that interests me. Like, is there a clear pattern of which side it starts from?
Oh, it's always the thing, right? I mean, back when I started my previous company, Dejobaan, I wanted to do interesting, just weird shit. And, not a lot of people were doing super weird shit back then, last millennium. And, more recently jumped forward a quarter century plus. I had spent a few years kind of like moonlighting at Valve, working on game discovery for point of sale, right? I mean, they're their sales platform. They're like, okay, if you know about a game sort of somewhere in your head, we should be able to portray it in a way that makes sense for you to convert into actually buying that game, which is great. But game discovery, as you know, is this entire big problem where most studios uh, they have their trouble at the beginning, like the awareness, the first impressions. And so I wanted to solve the problem of creating the first impressions of all games in a way that made sense to consumers, and creating the mechanism that connected the gamers who would love these exact games to those games.
So, as you said, this is not, this go round is your third. And so it's
Yes.
definitely not your first rodeo as far as starting a company and figuring all that out. But this time, right, like once you decided you were going to found a company and you started down that path, what were the biggest things that you had to like go and figure out this time around that you're were potentially different because it's a different kind of company or a different problem space, or even just like something you didn't feel like you had really mastered the first two times around? What was the thing that you're like, okay, if I'm going to do this, and so because I'm going to do this, now I have to go and figure out this big thing?
Sure. So the first two companies were content companies. The first is, we did I call it a moderately multiplayer online game back in the mid 90s, where that meant like 100 plus players online, and that was primarily text based. And next studio was about initially Palm Pilot and Windows games, and like it was both of those were about games. And so in my career, I've spent a pretty significant amount of it just understanding how to create a game, a thing that's a game. And this is completely different. And both of those were either, both of those were LLCs. The first one took on angel investments, the second one I bootstrapped, and this is an investor backed C corp that does video game platform, right? Discovery platform. So the whole concept of like, what do investors want? How do you form a C corp? Oh wow, that's a lot different from owning 100% of an LLC.
Mhm.
And building out a platform. What is, like I understand the audience, I understand the B2B side pretty well. Like developers need visibility, and I have my network there, but like what does platform want? How does it grow? And the just like being able to experiment and get things wrong and pivot has been at once similar to games because we prototype, right, and we make a lot of mistakes, but also different because the types of mistakes are different. Instead of like, oh, this combat system doesn't work, or oh, we shouldn't go turn based with pause, or real time with pause here. We should do this other thing. This is more like, what types of content are people interested in? Am I correct in my assumption that gaming consumers are interested in discovery? Or do they have a problem where they need a game right now and they need to solve that problem? Well, no, they just end up instead immersing themselves in gaming culture and entertainment and find games that way. So it's like a lot of assumptions just completely wrong, and the way that we test those and pivot are familiar but different.
It's always something that I love to talk with people who have been on the founding journey multiple times, because you've clearly been through it, right? In this case twice, and said, yeah, sign me up for that again, right?
Mm-hmm.
What, I guess, when you look back, there's sort of this idea. I'm going to shift gears for a second. There's sort of this idea that kind of biologically, after women give birth, there's a whole bunch of chemicals released and stuff that actually make them sort of forget about the worst parts of it, so they don't mind doing it again.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious, like, is it you've been through them and they were just such positive experiences and now you can do it so you don't mind doing it again? Or do you feel like there's some selective amnesia of forgetting the worst parts of a journey, and so you sort of sign up for it again and now you're in the thick of it and you're like, why did I do it again? Or like, what is your relationship to that founding journey that now here on your sort of third time around?
So starting and launching a game is not dissimilar from starting a company, in that there's a lot of stuff that you're doing from ground zero. It's not exactly the same thing. Like obviously you're not forming a corporation or an LLC each time, but you're putting together perhaps a slightly different team for projects that are significantly apart. You're either raising funding or allocating funding, and you're putting together a bunch of, like, unless it's a sequel, you're doing a lot that's new and different. So, as you say, not my first rodeo, not just because of the two companies that I had founded previously, but because multiple projects of all sizes and shapes that I've done. Uh, have you ever read the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett?
I've read some of it, not all of it.
Okay, so there's this group called, if memory serves, the Silver Horde, led by Cohen the Barbarian. And it's basically just like Conan the Barbarian, all these iconic fighters, but they're all octogenarians. They're all old. And I'm not quite there yet, but the thing that Pratchett said about them wasn't that they were super fast and spry anymore, but they kind of had been through it so much, so often, so many times, that they just always happened to position themselves to be in exactly the right spot to fend something off or to do a counterattack or whatever. So, one of the things that it took me a while to learn, and I haven't gotten this perfect, but in like 90% of things that would worry or stress me out before just don't stress me out anymore. Like, we are going into fundraising, and there's something that took me away from fundraising, like the preparation of this for 2 weeks. It was a vacation followed by sort of like a oh my god, I got to do this other thing, and I could see a younger me, a more junior me, would be like, holy crap, we need to be doing more product. We the product isn't good enough. The pitch isn't good enough. We got to get, we got to do this whole platform corner of the whole, the product that we haven't done in order to get to investment. And kind of like, not quite. So, I still got my hair. It's, dark hair for now. But Silver Horde thinking is, wait a second, what is really important? Cut it down to that. Is that actually fine? And do we need to stress about it? And the answer, I think, we'll see how it goes if we're still here in 5 years. Is basically no. We did what's important. We are doing what's important, and dropping all of the busy work and dropping all of the fat and going for just the muscle and the flesh. So, in looking back to your initial question, I I there's a lot of stuff that baggage that I've just dropped off, and we're going more lean, and it's not relaxing, but kind of refreshing and lightweight now.
I think that moves nicely into a common question that I'll probably ask in a few different ways as we go along. But, thinking back to your first rodeo or even your second rodeo with everything that you've, been armed with now here in the middle of your third, when you meet someone who's like, oh, I'm thinking about starting a company, I'm thinking about starting my first company, I'm thinking about going on this founding journey, what's sort of the biggest learning from that deciding to start a company point that you would try to teach them when they ask you about it?
Sure. So it's really situational because everybody's different and everybody could use different bits of advice. And of course, my lived experience is going to be different from yours. By and large, when I talk to folks and I do advisory or just chewing the fat, people will have a really good idea of what they want to build, and they have the skills to do it, and they understand games reasonably well, insofar as anybody can understand how to build a game. Um, I I I think there are two things, and above all else is to just build out your network so you're talking to a bunch of really smart people semi regularly, and you're talking to the same people over the course of a year multiple times, so that they know what you're doing, they can give you a little bit of advice, and they can amplify what's interesting about what you're doing to other people. And then to understand the market a little better than most game devs start out with, because we're in games because we love games. Most of us doing paid premium games or even whatever. And we're like, I love puzzle platformers. I grew up on puzzle. I actually didn't. I was like I grew up on. We only had 3 pixels back in the day. But they jumped on each other. Um, and so, like take what you're trying to create and try to look at it through the lens of the market. And here's how you do it. I'll give that sort of advice. And I don't have all the answers, but I think if you get those two things, you are ahead of 99% of folks starting a new company in games content.
Awesome. Now, for this endeavor, you mentioned that your first startup, you started it with 5 friends, and then the second one you went solo. Did you get co-founders for this third time around, or are you solo again?
So I was solo for the beginning of this because, it's a funny story. John Graham, co founder of Humble Bundle, started up a fund. And he walked up to me one day and with drinks in hand, he's like, I want to talk to you. What are you doing? And he essentially wanted to fund, the first check in of what our next venture was. And I had not left my previous company, Dejobaan, at that point, but I was very much interested in completing the kind of like my game discovery solution work, doing top of funnel game discovery. And, I'm a technical founder kind of guy who also understands the biz dev side of things. So I started out solo, but I quickly pulled together a team of folks that I needed based on where that took me. So I stole from my previous company, Dan Brainerd, who has always been the kind of like the narrative creative soul of many things that I've worked with him on and off for 30 years. And he's one of the reasons why our content is so good. And then I wanted to find somebody in product marketing who understood strategic marketing, technical marketing, but also the product side. And I brought on Matt Martindale to head up growth and marketing. So while they're technically not co-founders, I did, I wanted to tool around a little bit and then figure out whom I needed and then to pull in the right people pretty quickly.
Do you think of them like, even if they are not co-founders on the like strict definition of the word, do you operate currently as if they are like peers and co-founders in that way?
Yeah, I mean, let's take Matt for example. Like he and I talk every day. We're a small company, so obviously we do, but like at the strategic level, and also we get our hands dirty. So he is the guy that I bring to GDC, for example, when we are talking to investors and trying to, like, uh, what else, doing user studies to figure out just what the heck should we build, and there are few major decisions, if any, that I don't consult with him about. So in that way, I mean, like absolutely, a peer, and on I don't know. So I guess that's the role of a co-founder, even if it's not technically, you know, I just steal him away from solar energy. Uh, I don't feel bad about that. He's awesome. But even if folks aren't there from day one, they can be partners in that regard.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, the way I define co-founders is less about, were they there on day one setting up the legal entity, and much more like in the business. An employee, I think, can be there and can be part of decisions and in many ways operate as a peer, but they don't shoulder the business in the same way, right? They don't feel a responsibility for the continuation of business in the same way, right? Like I often talk about it as like they don't, whenever I have founded a company, in the back of my vision, like right here in my mental vision, there's just a ticking clock that is our runway, right? And I think that is something that founders, co-founders feel to their bones, regardless of
Hmm.
when they started or not. Whereas an employee can be highly committed, but just doesn't have that same sense, right? and nor is expected to, right? Like there
Hmm.
is no expectation of that. And so, regardless of when they join, I think folks who operate at that level, who shoulder the business alongside you, are definitely co-founders. You mentioned a little bit about bringing them in as you make decisions, especially decisions that they have expertise in. How do you deal with the disagreements, right? Like how do you talk through the disagreements with your co-founders?
You know, if you watch Star Trek: The Next Generation, which is my favorite Star Trek, although I love Lower Decks, there's a lesson learned from Jean-Luc Picard early, it's years ago at this point, and it was that a leader will go in and he'll take a problem or he'll state a problem, and he and his team will work through the solutions. Right? What do we need to know? What are the possible solutions? What are we not seeing? And then the leader's job is to say, okay, look, based on everything that we found, here's the direction that we're going to go. And and I think a good leader and one who is trusted is one who is willing to say and known as saying, like, look, I'm not always going to make the right decision here, but I'm going to take everybody's input. We're gonna make a decision. I'm gonna make a decision about how to go in. We're gonna try that out, and then we're gonna evaluate that. So there are always going to be disagreements, right? There's like people are gonna say, I think we should do, I think the logo should be yellow instead of red, and so some of those disagreements are like, look, let's table that for now. But some of them are very real. Like, should we be working on implementing discussion groups now because we want to be a platform for games discovery, or do we want to focus on the recommendation engine first? And the team knows that I will just, I'll listen to them, and then I'll say, okay, a decision needs to be made. Let's try this and then look back, and we'll course correct as necessary. And by and large, over my career, I've done it so wrong. There are people I don't talk to anymore because I've done it wrong, and they're good people that we all meant well, but we just sort of butted heads. But I think being able to say, look, we'll do X and then evaluate, uh, seems to have the best results.
You mentioned that both of the folks that you're working with on this you've known for a while.
No, actually, Dan Brainerd I've known for decades. Matt Martindale I haven't known for very long at all.
Okay.
He came to me. He is actually my brother-in-law who's done some QA work at my previous company. On hearing that I needed a marketing and growth person, said, "Hey, let's talk to my buddy Matt." So this is my brother-in-law's old school chum, and I'm like, oh gosh, really? You want me to talk to? He's done some games adjacent stuff. He doesn't. Well, Matt came to me at our first meeting with a 14-page slide deck about where we are in the industry, what the market looks like, and where we should be going, and what the product could be doing. And I'm like, oh, he understands it. And we did a little bit of a trial run, and that after that, he was perfect.
So I think that's actually perfect because, like, you have one of your co-founders you haven't known for very long, and sort of you went through a series of both working together and sort of trialing some stuff, as well as just conversations that you're like, okay, this person is the right fit. And then you have someone who you've known for quite a long time and have worked together on a lot of stuff, and you're like, he's the right fit. I'm curious, what were the sort of big hallmark conversations in your brain, or moments in that relationship where you went, yes, this is absolutely the right person, especially in the case of, like, with Dan, you have all this context of working with him together. But to your earlier sort of point, your previous two endeavors have been make game.jpg, right? Whereas this is
Mhm.
very different exercise. And so you're still like, he's still the right fit, but I could see a different world where it's like, oh, actually, he's too locked into the making game side of it, not the discovering game side of it. And so he's an amazing person, but not the right fit for this. And so, how did you navigate understanding that in the moment of like, okay, I've done some solo work, I have a strong idea of what I need. Now let me go talk to these people and find the right fit, right?
So Dan is a storyteller first, and game discovery really is the work of storytelling because it's not, as some platforms view it, a consumer coming and shopping for a game. I need a game right now. What is the game? I will hit a button and then I will get a game out. Sometimes it's like that, right? Friday night rolls around and my buddies and I want a multiplayer co-op online thing. So yes, we need to push button get game or games there. But modern audiences especially uh, like to find out about games as entertainment, right? So they will go and watch streamers who are entertaining. They will talk on Discord or Discord servers or in subreddits or with their friends, and it's kind of like it's a situation where, in many cases, the actual game discovery happens as a byproduct of fun being had. So Dan, being a storyteller, somebody who creates a narrative, is perfect for that. So because we are trying to create things that are fun to be around and in, we can talk about the specifics, but I don't want to get too detailed into it. But it's like fun experiences where you learn about games. Well, who better but somebody who understands narrative and storytelling? And once I knew I wanted to work with Dan. I always want to work with Dan. It's been true for 30 years at this point. But once I understood that there was that entertainment aspect of it at the core, I think it was clear that he was the one who was going to help us with that.
So you mentioned that this is sort of your first time doing the C Corp fundraising journey. Um, I'm sure from your prior experiences and just time in the industry, you had some opinions and views of what that was going to be like, right? And having been in the industry and lived through the 2020 through 2022 era, I'm sure there's all sorts of views and references you had for that. But when you actually sat down and you look back on how fundraising has gone so far. I know you're about to sort of go into another round of it, but like so far, when you think about your fundraising journey so far, what's the biggest difference between how you thought it would go and what's actually sort of played out?
I was originally most interested in venture funding, and it turned out that we got our pre-seed, exceeded our pre-seed goals through angel funding. Looking back, that doesn't surprise me because like my network is reasonably strong at this point, right? I mean, I've spent so many years in games. I've done a bunch of advocacy in games. I've done advisory. I have some accomplishments in games, and I put myself out there, and I'm working on a problem that so many games companies have. So you combine, hey, I know a bunch of people, with, hey, I'm probably not a serial killer, with, hey, this, Chiro has an idea that sounds credible, uh, combined with, oh, and by the way, this if it's successful, it will solve our problems, right? Personal, our studio, our specific company problems that every company has. That, like, looking back, it makes sense that we got traction with our angels, and I'm very, very grateful to them. And I suspect that, well, I don't, who knows anything anymore, Carl, but like, I like to think that if we had not achieved that success with angels, we could have done well with the VCs, but we didn't need to, and that I feel fortunate.
When you're looking at the next raise, which I assume would be, I mean, the names don't mean anything, but I assume you would functionally be the seed, right? Because you have the pre-seed. How are you viewing that this time around? Like, do you look at it more as like actually, given the state of the market, go back to the angel crowd and sort of like angels, family offices, that kind of stuff? Um, or is it nope, round two is like talk to VCs, or like how are you sort of processing it in this moment in the market with your experience?
Sure. It is one of the most treacherous, horrible environments for fundraising, right? I mean, you've seen the charts lately. They're just like, and $3 was allocated in the last quarter for video games. Uh, I think no stone unturned is the correct approach. We have what I view as a uh, a solid story for both angels and VCs. So we're going to hit both up. We have we have a part of, we have a big slice of the pie that we'd like to bring some industry veteran angels on for, and then the rest we would like to fill out with venture folks. So I, I mean, not sure what to say except for like I hope we, first VC we talk to gives us the full check, but I'm not going to count on that. We're going to hit up everybody that we can, regardless of regardless of size, as long as they're interested in doing a seed stage fund.
When you look back, and I guess look forward in many ways, right? Like, because unfortunately, in startups, you're kind of always fundraising. What's been the hardest part of that fundraising side of the journey for you, right? Like, this is obviously not, old to some degree, old hat in some ways, but also a new version of the old hat that you're navigating. You know, when you look back on it so far, like, what's been the hardest part for you personally going through that journey?
Sure. Fundraising is not like a sometimes food. You are fundraising or not, or at least for me, like it is all consuming of time and mostly my brain power. I'm fairly introverted, so just going out and outreaching and talking is just really draining for me. And also going and preparing stuff. So, oh, I talked to investors. Now I need to prepare this other thing. I learned an interesting lesson about a decade ago from a Kickstarter campaign that my previous company ran. And I had heard that Kickstarter was great because you could, back then, decade plus ago, you could raise a good amount of money and gain discovery on the platform. I think it's tougher for a video game to do that now, but we heard from colleagues who had then recently run a campaign of their own that it was one of the most grueling months of their lives. And so we talked to them and others about like, what was tough? Why were you losing sleep? Why was it difficult for you? And we balled that all up into what can we do to prepare in advance of that month of heck? And I got to tell you, Carl, we did that. We recorded videos. We crossed our T's, dotted our I's. We set up all of the marketing copy, the update copy ahead of time. And the actual Kickstarter month was one of the most relaxing months of the entire year. Now, I do not want to kid myself and believe that I can do that for this fundraising, but and honestly, pre-seed was both easy and impossible in that, like, once we dialed in our pitch and our audience, it was like, yes, we resonated really well, but dialing that in was very difficult and draining and time consuming. I don't think we can I don't think we can coast, but I've learned to talk to people to look back on our first round, to sort of ball all of that up and to try to prep as much as I can before we go into this so that we're not having that month of heck or fundraising. It's going to be more than a month. And I'm hoping we'll talk in a quarter, see how it went, that the lessons that we learned make things a little less hard.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that you can do. Like, I think preparation wise, for sure, just as far as like the deck and or in a Kickstarter case, all the copy and all, like there's technical preparation that can make life easier. But I think there's also sort of that mental and emotional uh, preparation. Like to your point, you talked to a bunch of people who had a really hard time. You went in prepared to know that it could be a really hard time. What can we technically do to make it? But like some of that is also you're just emotionally and mentally prepping for it. And so even if it's hard, it won't feel as hard because you were maybe expecting the worst, and it's it only moderate, right? And I think fundraising can be the same, right? Like many times the folks who go in and have a really hard time fundraising emotionally, I think, are the folks who this is their first time fundraising and first time on their own company, and they don't realize that how many no's you're going to get, right? Especially compared to like pitching something internal to a studio. There's really only one major no, whereas in this one there's you're going to talk to 50 people, really 47 to 49 of them in the best case scenario are going to say no, and you end up with the three who say yes, right? But that's still a lot of rejection that people are not used to dealing with. um, and so being able mentally and emotionally prepared for that and having gone through the experience before goes a long way. um, Staying on the sort of focus on yourself going through this journey now for the third time, uh, what do you feel like your biggest struggle is as a founder, and how have you been approaching it on this time around?
You know, this is kind of hackneyed at this point, but like I talk to friends and colleagues who are diagnosed with ADHD, and I kind of wonder about myself because I tend to just go in all sorts of directions, and that's something that I'll probably I'll probably get looked into. But the and again, like I've had to learn how to focus, and how do you do that when there's so many directions that you could be going in a new studio? And with games, it's a little in my experience, it had been a little less of a question of, where do we go with this game? Because it's like I kind of want this game to be like blah, not blah, but like XYZ is, I have
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
vision, and we work towards the vision. And for a game discovery platform, man, I just don't know what's going to resonate until we try a bunch of stuff. So the question is, what stuff do we try? Where do we focus? How long do we give it? And that has been really exciting, but also just nerve wracking because I got to fight my own tendency to just be too defocused and just to jump at, hey, I think we should do a like let's implement a system where our platform will generate, I don't know, quizzes for all 500 genres of games that are out there and build out this great system, and we'll try, right? Or do I do this thing where I'm like, well, we got to build out this taxonomy of Steam games and yada yada yada. What do we do next out of all the things, and how do we scope everything has been very difficult for me, in part because it's so different from building out a game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think in any startup, opportunity costs are the like challenge you stare at and you're like overwhelmed by, and especially in a new area where there's so much to learn by every experiment, every attempt at something. That in many ways the opportunity cost is very real because there's valuable lessons to be learned from everything. And so which valuable lessons do you give up in the short term or long term to focus on other ones is I can see being paralyzing in some ways. As you've navigated this startup, what have you found or built or like purposely built or found accidentally to be your really primary support structures to help you as a human get through this very stressful experience?
Well, you have this over at One Up, and we have this over at John Graham's Elbow Grease Games. There's like nothing as good as kind of like shared experience and problem solving. So that's, like folks say that it's good to have co-founders in your studio or your company, but even then, if you're leading up the company, you don't, a buck needs to stop somewhere, right? And so I can't always cry on Dan or Matt's shoulders. Just having colleagues who are founding companies, trying to build these companies up, are facing the same challenges with fundraising or staffing or experimentation or what have you, and just being able to be sometimes physically in the same room together, to have camaraderie and to have people tell each other, "You're not crazy. We're going through the same things. Have you thought of this?" Or just like, here's just I'm here for you, to listen to you. I remember earlier this year, John did a demo day, like like investor demo day, and Egg rented out a big hall. It was nice, and invited a bunch of investors and older folks to come in, and all of the Egg portfolio companies did like a 4-minute presentation, their pitch. And boy, there's just like the energy in the room, and the like, just hey, I just you just gave your talk and you're coming down from the podium. I'm coming up. Let's give each other a hug. It felt really good, and reminded me that I'm not just working on all of this in a vacuum. So I would have to say, just founder community has been one of the most valuable things this time around.
Yeah, I've definitely. I'm someone who comes from a background of a lot of multiplayer and social design in video games, and so it's like I've always understood the value of community and what that brings to you, and why guilds exist in games and all this kind of stuff. And I like, if you worked on BBS stuff, I'm sure you saw that stuff form organically and the power of it. And this time around has definitely been the like, oh yeah, that is not just a game specific thing. That's a human endeavor thing, right? And so finding those communities, I've been lucky enough to be part of One Up. I have a Discord with a bunch of game founders in it, which is where the whole podcast sort of started from. Has been a huge help for that journey. On the flip side, where do you feel like for yourself there's a gap in support, someplace where you're like, you deal with stress a lot, or you deal with anxiety or whatever a lot, and you don't feel like you have sufficient support, where you're like, oh, I wish I had more support, or I'm working to build more support for myself in this area?
Oh gosh, I mean, Boston, which is where I'm located, seems to love creating these wonderful fostering these wonderful minds, and then just ejecting them off of the East Coast out to to Silicon Valley or whatever. We have a good game dev community around here. I wish we had more game startups in the area and game adjacent startups. And I know, like we do have tech startups, MIT, Harvard around here. So there's that stuff. But for a couple of reasons, I I wish I had more local physical communities. So we don't right now have many game studios starting up in Boston. Like I don't funding is crazy pants. But also, I'm a parent of a 6-year-old and a 19-month-old, which means that I actually have to be home for a lot of it, and therefore I can't just go out to like these wonderful events that do exist. So personally, I Carl, I want more, right? I want more community. I want more. I would like to just. I love being able to go out with colleagues and to just uh, sit and talk. And I get that online, and I get that at GDC and Dice and so forth in person, but it's not like something that I need once or twice in person a year. I need this every month, multiple times a month. So I like to host events in my backyard here. We have a nice backyard, and it's game devs, but it's and everybody's really nice, but it's not many tech game studio founders, and so I'm feeling the need for that.
I apologize for being on the opposite coast. Otherwise, I'd come and hang out.
You should. You make it to Boston. The autumn is gorgeous. Winter is cold. Summer was weirdly hot, but spring is good too. So if you ever you want to, PAX East, show off your stuff, I'll be here for you.
Excellent, excellent. You've talked a bit, or we've talked a bit about the sort of immediate horizon you have of fundraising, but when you're looking about, thinking about the company and yourself, over the next 6 months, a year, sort of that horizon, not exactly what is keeping you up at night, but what are you like actively putting mental energy to thinking about and looking at the horizon and planning for?
Sure. I mean, we are pre-revenue. That's the sexy term for penniless. No, not penniless. What is it? We're not making like there's a certain point where you start turning the spigot open, and I guess we haven't done that yet. So I am trying to figure out, first of all, when that is, because we have an audience. We haven't monetized that yet. And we have game studios who are like, when can we advertise? Which is a great problem to have, right? It's where people we monetize through ads placed on our platform. So the question is, oh my gosh, should we do it sooner and then show a small amount of revenue initially? Do we do it later and monetize later and just see the war chest dwindling? So that is I guess it's a different problem to have than I had before as game content, because at my last company, okay, we had this game that we're doing and we launched the game and then we start seeing money. It's not like you can, I guess technically at some point you could do early access or you could sell pre-release copies or whatever, but like it's a new problem. So like when to start monetizing, and then what are the attendant problems there? Because once we start doing that, we have a whole new classification of thing that we have to worry about. So the question is, when do we start doing that? And then like what keeps me up is like, are we working on the right things? They, uh, I will tell you right now that the the fun stuff that I think is going to draw from my experience as a game developer is I think is going to turn out to be more important than I'm letting it be, if that makes sense. So, a game discovery platform, the purpose is to surface games, right? Ostensibly, but really in practice, the purpose is to give people an environment that they're happy to be in, and then discovery can happen as a byproduct. So, like, people should have fun on our platform. And I worry that I'm not going to be bringing enough joy and fun from what I do, did in a past life. And how do you balance that against the tech of creating a platform and making sure that it doesn't fall over on itself?
Well, and it feeds it of like the more time you spend on making it fun, the more people hopefully will want to be on the platform, which means that the platform then has to be that much more robust, which means you need to spend time making it that much more robust, right? So it's a problem that feeds other problems, not necessarily alleviates them.
Yep.
Normally I close out with what I call an entirely unfair question, but for repeat founders, I don't think it's particularly unfair. The way I normally frame this question is, given the experience thus far, like ignore what the outcome of your current endeavor might be, right? But flash some number of years in the future, would you start another company? But given that you've done that a couple times, like, what's your relationship to starting companies at this point? Do you think every company is your last company, or are you like, this fun journey, and then I'll totally go on another one?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm fairly senior in my career at this point, which means like that is a question that keeps me up at night. Hopefully this is the last company that I need to found in the financial sense. Hey, I'm not a billionaire yet. We'll see. I'll put it this way: let's say that Totally Human Media and We Love Every Game are wildly successful, and I solve game discovery for everyone in games, consumers, studios, big, small, medium, it doesn't matter. There are so many fun problems to be solved in the universe, so many interesting things to explore, and so many directions to go in that I cannot imagine that I would just stop at that point. What is the next thing to solve after games discovery? I don't know. Ask me in 5, 10 years. We'll see.
I mean, I think like the fun part about solving problems is all the unintended or unanticipated consequences of solving that problem. And usually, what that means is that there are now new fun problems that you get to solve. So,
Yes. I've solved game discovery now with, oh man, I hope that doesn't cause more problems.
I mean, I doubt it will be. It is, in my experience, which is anecdotal and limited, but it is very rarely that solving the problem cause new problems, and much more that when you solve one problem, so now you can spend time noticing the ones that one was hiding or making less frequent or was just distracting from, and you're like, oh right, you know.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, like online digital distribution solved the problem of having to be in a big box store with a box and a physical, a publisher and so forth, which just highlighted other issues which we're
Yep.
now dealing with right now. So, 100% agree.
Yep. So to close out the sort of interview, I do what I call the introspection lightning round. And where this came from is these are questions that I would give potential co-founders when we would first start co-founder dating, to bring their answers to sort of our first big in-person meeting, right? And I would bring my answers and we would compare them, and it was just about like understanding how we would fit together as co-founders. And so I am just recycling those and using them on all my poor unsuspecting guests in a lightning round fashion.
Okay, but Carl, you gave us all the questions in advance, so that's totally fair.
You'd be surprised at how many people actually read them. So, uh, you know, I will take it, and don't shatter the illusion for my audience. Come on, man. No, I'm kidding. We start with, what is your superpower?
I am able to synthesize a bunch of information from really weird disparate parts and come up with something that is just bizarre, right? I mean, so, you know, the idea of no, Carl, this is the first thing that I'm going to have you excise,
Okay,
because what a lame answer that is. Can you ask the question again?
for sure. What is your superpower?
Damn it, now I'm all flustered. I'm flustered. You can keep this in. That's totally okay. My superpower, when I use it correctly, is that I will take something and I can apply it in a really bizarre direction. Example is uh, we had this isn't super novel anymore, but like back in the day, when Steam first launched, we did a game about base jumping, and we called it 25 letter A's in a row, and we named it that, and we broke Steam several times as a result of that. And we did a lot of thinking about what are all the weird ways that we could make it interesting to folks. So, naming it something. Our Rock Paper Shotgun did a piece on us, and we replied in video format. And back then it was novel, and they did another article on us. Then I think that we have always I've punched above my weight by sort of like thinking back and saying, okay, what is an interesting direction that will make this differentiate this particular thing. And two-part answer. I know this is lightning, and the other half is that I like forming communities, and that's always helped everybody in the area and also myself.
Outside of your superpower, what are your biggest strengths?
I think at this point in my career and development, I am a good leader in that I build consensus and I bring uh, my team in from, I won't say like, disparate points of view to agreement, but I think I'm the type of leader who can manage group of people who are seeing different things and then getting us all to see the same thing as, look, this isn't necessarily the solution, but this is a thing that makes sense. Let's try this out and move forward with that. I'll give you, I guess this, again, not to be too delightening, but one of my team was very worried about our future several months ago, and he wrote me a 3-page, just like, here are all the problems that we're having, and I'm so worried. And he was keeping him up at night. And I sat, younger Ichiro would immediately respond like, you're wrong with this. You don't have to worry about that. Whatever. I think, a little. I still got 50 years left in my career, so but more senior Ichiro's like, look, I'm going to sit back. I'm going to talk to him. I want you to, I asked him to sort of like restate everything he sent in his message. And then I tried to understand how that related to the way I think about it. And I'm like, oh, he's really worried because his last company went out of business for these particular reasons. And then I was able to say, okay, here's where we are. You're seeing a thing here. Let me tell you how I've been thinking about that and what our next steps are that are going to solve that. And by the end of the meeting, we were all, he was all smiles, and the feeling didn't go away immediately, but by the end of the week, he was like, I see how your plan solved the uncertainty. Now, granted, we may be out of business in 2 years. You never know. But I think the being able to sort of sit back and to listen and take stuff in and to say, okay, here's the direction we're going in, and here's why, really has been a strength for me.
On the flip side, what are your big weaknesses?
I'm still really easy to distract with a shiny new thing. This has killed multiple projects over my career as a game developer. So I need time away from a thing to be able to evaluate it properly, which means that a completely different thing can capture my attention if I'm not careful. So, and the worst thing about it, Carl, is that in what we're doing, we need to try so many experiments. So it's hey, have, like, sugar's bad for you, but have more sugar. You need more sugar, and here's all these candies. Just really, I've had to be very careful about kind of like balancing all of that. So far, so good.
I can definitely see that being a challenge. I also just have a vision of like you sitting back for a day, and then your arch enemy, the super villain to your superhero, just comes in with dangling keys and goes clink 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 clink, clink to distract you from everything.
And it's never a malicious thing. It's just like, and my team's like, this is a great, I have this great idea. And like, that is a great idea. We do need to increase the resolution of the taxonomy so that we're better than Steam, but that's where documentation and just sort of like evaluation and putting things away for a day help.
Yeah, sure. What behaviors are your stress reactions? Like, what behaviors come out of you when you are under intense stress?
Sure. I mean, like any founder, game dev team, a problem comes along, you must whip it. Like more work, right? I can, hey, we're not where we need to be with product. Therefore, the solution is more work, right? Everybody has this. And I think in the same way that people learn meditation, it's like if you're feeling really stressed out, the solution isn't to solve it immediately. The immediate solution isn't to solve it. It's to sort of just like sit back, relax, take a breath. And so this time when I quote unquote realized, OMG, we're nowhere near where we need to be to pitch. Well, to heck with that, man. You're never where you need to be to pitch. So instead of diving in and having the team just sort of crunch, I sat back and I said, look, let's spend a few days not doing that. And then I had a vacation scheduled. So he's even more spending time away from that. And then I'm like, you know what? We don't need to do anything more. We need to talk about it differently because we've done a bunch of cool stuff. So let's talk about our strengths because that's what the pitching, needs to be. So I think the reaction to something going wrong is to spend a bunch of time and effort and energy fixing it. And my solution nowadays is to try to pull myself away from that.
And then the final one is, what do you need to have happen on a regular basis, sort of in your professional life, in order to keep your stress levels sort of even keel? I call these upkeep needs, like things that you just need to have happen on a regular basis, and then you're pretty good. But if they don't happen regularly enough, you find yourself spiking out on stress pretty easily.
Sure. So, the big answer is going to be the same for everyone. Like, are we in business? And that basically boils down to, do we have enough in the bank to meet payroll for the next N number of months? Setting that aside, I'll go back to the whole, just, am I having enough human contact, talking about specifically the problems that I and similarly like focused people are having? And when I talk to people, and if it's over a vid chat, that's good. If it's over whiskeys, that's good. If it's a talk that ends with, oh, I need to introduce you to this other person who really, really needs to hear what you're doing, that's great. So if I do get that, if I seek that out, I tend to, the games are so, like, I feel like we're very fortunate in many ways because our community, there's some bad actors, but like by and large, the community that I have around me, present company included, it's just we want each other to succeed. They're lovely people, we're creative and, positive people. So where I want to go with all of that is that, like, if I get that and, I people are telling me, yes, you're doing the right thing and I'm going to connect you with other people and what you're doing is valuable, that keeps me going.
Well, thank you so very much for joining me on the podcast and sharing your stuff. I think the work you're doing is really, really important. I think game discovery is, to our collective conversation, a huge pain point in the industry right now. And I think the way you're thinking about it and bringing your energy to it is really awesome and amazing. So thank you for doing what you do. If someone out there listened to this podcast and really wanted to connect with you about something you said, or just, have one of these conversations and get to know you better and share their collective experience and build community, what's the best way for them to reach out and get in touch with you?
Sure. You can email me at Ichiro, that's ICHIRO, at totallyhuman.io. Or I'm on LinkedIn, Ichiro Lambe.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Carl, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the entire episode. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends or anyone you think could benefit from it, and leave us a positive rating or subscribe. This episode was edited by Christopher Delano, music by Jake Hall, who's available for composer work in games. And if you're interested in learning more about the Game Founders support community, go to gamefounders.org or email me at carl@gamefounders.org. Thanks so much.